Good morning. Welcome to the fifth edition of the Trade and Development Webinar Series, which aims to deepen public understanding of the nexus between free trade and development, globalization, and the importance of intra-African trade vis-a-vis the African Continental Free Trade Area, AfTA. My name is Victoria Temitope Raimi, Communications Associate at Ominira Initiative for Economic Advancement. We have three speakers today who will be speaking on the topic food security and intra-African trade. We have Moki Musila, Anna Suberu, and Chiamaka Adinu. Moki Musila is a Kenyan-based economist with a passion for driving positive change through his work. He currently serves as the Communications and Marketing Associate at Liberty Sparks, where he applies his expertise to promote impactful initiatives. Moki is an alumnus of Maseno University, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics and Economics with a specialization in Information Technology. With a keen interest in cross-border policy, Moki is actively engaged in a significant project focusing on awareness and educational efforts related to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Our second speaker, Anna Suberu, is the Alumni Engagement Associate at Students for Liberty. Her interests cut across the intersection of freedom, peace, and development. She has a bachelor's degree in human nutrition and dietetics and is a registered dietitian nutritionist. Anna got involved with SFL as a writing fellow with africanliberty.org, a platform advancing individual freedom, peace, and prosperity in Africa by promoting civil discussion and debate about social, legal, economic, and global issues affecting Africans. Anna is passionate about development and spreading ideas of freedom. Our work focuses on policy engagement, the establishment of free market projects, and the development of opportunities for strategic policy and social impact. Our third speaker for today is Chiamaka Adinu. She's a fellow at Ominira Initiative for Economic Advancement. She is currently studying for a master's degree in food science and quality engineering. She has been published on Vanguard, Business Day, Daily Trust, and many more. Back to our topic. Our topic for today will be focusing on food security and intra-African trade. Food and nutrition is one of the critical components undermining the survival of Africans. According to the state of food security and nutrition in the world, in 2020, 282 million Africans were undernourished. Continued conflict, climate change, inflation, and rising food prices are key drivers of this alarming trend. Countries like Kenya rely on international agricultural products due to 4 failed rainy seasons, and in a country like Nigeria, food access has been affected by persistent violence in the northeastern states of Borno, Adamawa, Yobe, and armed banditry and kidnapping in states such as Katsina, Sokoto, Kaduna, Benue, and Niger. In this webinar, we will look at the issue of food security and how intra-African trade can help improve food supply and improve nutrition across the continent. My first question goes to Muoki. What is food security and why is it important?
Thank you for having me for this webinar. When you say that 282 million Africans were undernutrition in 2020, you can imagine what sort of population and how big such a number is to say that people, so many people were under malnutrition. And to getting to your question on food security, for me, I think it's a fairly multifaceted concept, that generally deals with access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. So what you're getting is it's simply not just having access to food. It's the whole issue of making sure that it is sufficient. Throughout, it is safe to be consumed by humans, and that it is nutritious. Be able to have to meet those dietary needs and food preferences in order for human beings to be able to lead a healthy lifestyle. So I think that gives you the whole concept of there being physical issues, being social factors, and being economic factors that affect the ability of people to be able to access food with those particular qualities that I just mentioned. And yeah, I think it's very important for various reasons. When you look at the definition that I just gave, if you are not having access to food that is safe, or rather that has those nutrition factors that we are talking about, you realize at the end of the day, the human health, the condition of the humans who are consuming food will be affected. In your introduction, of course, you've mentioned things like conflicts that we are having. Mostly, you find that the conflicts that we have across the continent, actually, Nigeria, Kenya, South Sudan, or wherever, they center at the end of the day on matters access to food. So you can see how food affect various issues to do with the political stability of countries. When communities are fighting, whether it's because of cattle and so on, the whole issues that we have around social cohesion. And of course, you realize that it becomes a bit challenging for nations that are not having sufficient food, or rather, they are not food secure, to be able to sustain any development, to make any significant leaps out of the poverty, that has dragged us Africans backwards so long. So yeah, food that is nutritious, secure, and adequate is important for those particular reasons. Yeah, I think that would be my submission.
Thank you very much, Moki. Chiamaka, can you please contribute to the question? What is food security and why is it important?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question and also for having me at this webinar. So for me, I would say that there are many definitions of food security, and to many people, it means different things. It means accessibility, it means availability. But I think personally, I would go with the FAO definition, with the Food and Agriculture Organization definition, which is that when food security is when all people at all times have access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food products. It means that there are basically 4 keywords there. Everybody has to have access, both physical access and economic access to food, and this food has to be safe and nutritious. This is also what is encompassed in the 4 pillars, 4 components of food security, and that is the food availability, accessibility, stability, and utilization. It means that people has to have access. The food has to be very close to consumers, and they should also be able to afford the food products, and these food products in question should be able to meet the dietary needs of humans, and also it should be stable enough, meaning it should be safe enough. That is what food security means. So somebody can actually have access to food products, but it is not meeting the dietary needs, it is not utilizable by the body. It still means that that person is experiencing a form of security. So these 4 pillars of food security must be met in order to say that this is okay, that this person is food secure. So the 4 pillars again are the accessibility, availability, utilization, and stability of food products. So in my opinion, this is what food security means. And food security, of course, is important because food is the basics of life. Without food, you do not have life. And it encompasses like it cuts across many sectors. So it cuts across the economic development of a country, because if there is no food security, the economic development of a country is hampered. And also the youth, the job creation, it affects.
Okay, thank you very much for that point. My next question goes to Anna. How would you describe the challenge of food security in Africa? Thank
Oh,
you.
yes. Yeah, so thanks for that question and thanks for having me. The challenges surrounding food security in Africa basically cover a lot of components, as Moki has rightly said, and also as Chiamaka has rightly said. It is a multifaceted issue when it comes to issues affecting food security. There are several dimensions and it cuts across several sectors of the economy. It cuts across political interests, it cuts across people's well-being, and also how they can be prosperous in whatever they're doing, because I mean, all of us need food to thrive and survive. So some of the challenges faced in Africa, these challenges have been recurrent over time. We know how much before COVID, food prices were relatively okay, but then when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, food prices skyrocketed, and also with the war in Ukraine as well, a lot of food price fluctuation was experienced in Africa. These challenges are also being faced at the same time while people are facing issues of political uncertainty. Like you said, in the north, there's a lot of insecurity, conflict among herders and also farmers, conflict among various people where they're basically grabbing land in the northern region. So farmers are not able to invest properly in agricultural practices. They see it as though even if they're able to cultivate crops and basically engage in farming activities, their land may be taken away from them the next day, so they are not able to invest fully in those practices on their farmlands. There's a lot of work to be done when it comes to addressing food security and the possible ways that trade can actually play a part in addressing these challenges. We know how trade basically promotes peace. When people are able to come together to engage in exchange that is beneficial for all parties involved, more people will be willing to trade freely, and more people will be willing to basically collaborate to overcome some of the challenges faced in their communities. Aside from the challenge surrounding conflicts, we know how in the Horn of Africa, the droughts have affected farming activities. A lot of crops cultivated in those regions, in Ethiopia and other parts of the Horn of Africa, are not basically drought-resistant crops. These crops are not able to survive the effects of climate change. And these are things that keep happening over the course of time, over several years. And because there's not enough investment in farming or enough investment in agriculture in Africa by governments and by all key stakeholders, these challenges continue to affect people who engage in farming practices. And we know already that Africa has like the highest percentage of arable land in the entire world, and a lot of our population engages in farming activities generally. So with more investment in addressing some of the challenges faced by farmers, it will be more possible to overcome issues of conflict. It will be more possible to overcome issues of climate change, where people are not aware of what they can do to probably get more, to cultivate more drought-resistant crops. A lot of farmers have still been engaging in farm practices that are basically not on par with current realities on the continent. So these are some of the challenges faced when it comes to agriculture in Africa, and also when it comes to promoting food security, because people are, first of all, faced with conflict. There's also the issue of not enough expansion of agricultural practices. There's also the issue of climate change. and generally issues affecting investment in infrastructure and technological development in Africa.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the answer. And speaking of agriculture, you have provided the factors that affect agriculture and that can cause food insecurity. And a country like Kenya that has experienced fulfilled rainy season now, and that has affected their food production and all that. Is there anything that can do, considering the fact that rain is a natural thing? Presently, I think they rely on international goods and food and products.
Yeah, so like you rightly said, a lot of countries in the continent depend on international imports. Generally, food production hasn't gotten to a level where farmers are able to cultivate and also trade both internationally and also like regionally as well. So when it comes to how farmers or people maybe in regions where they're faced with issues of maybe weather changes and all of that, it still boils down to the issue of promoting investment in infrastructure, basically infrastructure that combats these climate realities. First of all, some countries on the continent are focused on cultivating crops that have high global return. And these crops are not particularly easy to cultivate in Africa because we have our own staple crops that are easier to cultivate, and then they don't take as much toll on agricultural land and basically the way nutrients are used from soil and all of that. So when you look at crops like rice, when you look at crops like cotton, these are things that have high value on international sense, but it takes a lot of effort for local farmers to cultivate such crops. So we can combat this issue of climate change and also how to kind of cultivate crops that are in line with, I wouldn't say in line, but basically cultivating crops that support the weather conditions and also support like the climate realities on the continent. For example, in Kenya, I know between Kenya and Zambia, I think recently they came up with a method whereby farmers from Kenya could actually basically outsource land in Zambia to farmers in Kenya so that they could go to Zambia and then cultivate, and then they're able to take those crops back to their own country and then trade and all of that. So there are innovative ways to combat the issue of climate change. There are places that don't have sufficient arable land on the continent. So there are different ways to basically collaborate on continental level and also regional level for there to be more access for all parties involved. Beyond that, technological advancement is also key because, I mean, like you said, rain is a natural phenomenon. There's only so much you could do about it, but then there are certain practices that promote renewable energy, the use of renewable energy when it comes to cultivation, when it comes to kind of conserving the ecosystem. In Africa, we know how easy it is to just maybe decide to cut a tree or fell a tree just so you could like get firewood for energy. So if there's more investment in renewable sources of energy on the continent, whereby people do not keep engaging in practices that deplete the resources in the environment, it will be easier for these farmers and people engaged in agriculture to move from maybe previous ways that are not combating the current realities faced when it comes to climate change and all of that. But beside that, there's also emphasis on agricultural expansion. That's basically whereby researchers and people who have, I mean, a lot of research is being done on agriculture, and a lot of think tanks, a lot of policymakers are aware of what can be done to improve the agricultural scenes and the challenges faced by people when it comes to food security on the continent. So this knowledge has not been well dispersed to people in local communities, people who engage in farming. A lot of them don't know that there are newer ways to do things. There are other possible alternatives to cultivating crops that actually conserve the environment. So if there's more investment in agricultural expansion, more farmers, more people are aware of what they can do to combat the realities of climate change. This could involve practices as like kind of restoring land that has been used, because over time land gets depleted of certain resources. So practices like afforestation, practices like cultivating crops that do not take too much toll on the environment when it comes to water use and all of that. These things could help in combating the realities of climate change and basically addressing some of these challenges we face when it comes to food security and agriculture.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna, for that explanation. Chiamaka, is there a connection between food security and malnutrition?
Yes, there is a very big connection between food security and malnutrition. As well, the 4 pillars I previously stated, the 4 pillars of food security is availability, accessibility, utilization, and stability. And it is connected when food is not available, when any of these pillars is not present, when it is not available, when it is not accessible, or when it cannot be utilized by the body, or when the food product in itself is unstable, it is not safe, then the issue, health problems may arise, and that is what basically malnutrition is about. So, and what we do not know is that malnutrition can be in 2 forms. It can be undernutrition or it can be overnutrition. In Nigeria or in Africa, we generally believe that when we talk about malnutrition, we are talking about lack of food, lack of access to food products. But no, we have 2 forms. We have overnutrition and also undernutrition. So for undernutrition, this is when you are lacking vital, essential food products, like essential minerals in your body. And also undernutrition, overnutrition is now when you have excess of a particular nutrients in your body. For instance, in Africa or even in Nigeria, if I were to bring it home, we eat more of calorie-dense foods. Like we eat more of carbohydrates, our fufu, our pasta, our rice, everything is carbs, carbohydrates, and these are calorie-dense foods. So you see that we are actually, we have excess of these calories in our body. And this is what overnutrition is about, because then you see that it leads to health issues like obesity, and also we even take a lot of sweetened drinks, a lot of foods that are high in sugar. So, and this also leads to obesity, diabetes, and so many other cardiovascular issues as well. So you see that food security is linked to malnutrition because of these reasons. I mean, because it is sometimes the foods that we have are not either available, or they are not accessible, or they cannot be utilized by the body, or we are actually providing, or we are actually having access to just less or more than what we need for our body. So it is important when it comes to food security and when it comes to nourishment of the body, it is important that what we eat should be needed by the body and that we should eat it in the right quantity. So that is essentially how food security is related to malnutrition.
We don't have Victoria right there, so I think, and while we are waiting, we can just move forward. So I think Chiamaka just talked about the connection between malnutrition and food security and malnutrition, which is quite severe. But moving forward, how would you describe the importance of intra-African trade to addressing this food security problem? I think we should start with Musila. How do you think intra-African trade can help achieve food security? Because we've realized that this is something that's very important.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's also good to see you. Yeah, inter-African trade. Of course, one challenge, or rather one thing that I want to talk about is the comparative advantage when it comes to production of food substances across Africa. Someone has mentioned, for example, the challenges that we have in Kenya. For us, we produce a lot more tea. I think that's the most known product that comes from Kenya, and we might not have access to adequate adequate rice or adequate maize and beans and so on. And what happens with when we are able to do trade as a continent better is the fact that Kenya can be able to probably concentrate on the production of tea, and Nigeria maybe can focus on the production of cassava, and another country, focuses on a particular crop that they are good at are producing, and that is what I'm talking about when I refer to comparative advantage that we have. And when we are having improvements or rather when we are doing better in terms of intra-African trade, what means is that we are able to transact with each other better. What it means is that we are able to transport our products better. We are having better infrastructure. It means that the pricing of our substances, it means the storage, it means in terms of getting across borders, all the sorts of challenges that we are having across our borders. For example, we are neighbors in Kenya and Tanzania, but you can't imagine the amount of loss that happens within our borders with the delays, with the waiting, with the long periods of document processing and so on. It also means that trade in terms of the costs, the added costs that come with these delays and inconveniences that are happening within our borders, Golo. What this means is that we are able to do business with each other. A Kenyan is able to obtain the food products that they need from another country, and we are able to supply the very products that we are good at producing. So when I look at the inter-African trade and mostly under the African Continental Free Trade and the various regional blocks that we are having, I'm looking at the factor of a bit more expanded market access, such that the produce that we are having doesn't matter what the volumes are. We have a population of 1.3 billion people to target with our produce, and that is what I'm looking at in terms of enhancing our food security. Every country focusing on being able to produce what they are good at, what the climatic conditions allow, what the infrastructure, and be able to enhance the production of foods that we need, crops that we need, and be able to capitalize on that comparative advantage, and that should be able to attract a bit of increased investment in terms of improving the infrastructure that we have, because food production is all about business, and we all know that investors will tend to go to areas where they are bound to make more profit, where they are going to be, they are likely to have better returns on their incomes, and with more access to a bigger market, with reduced inconveniences and all the challenges that Africans currently are having in terms of supplying food products to other countries, I think we can be able to attract a bit more of investment in terms of agriculture into our continent. And yeah, in the long run, I believe we can be able to to improve our situation and better, and to be able to enhance our own food security, compared to how we are doing at the moment.
Okay, yeah, it's looking like we lost Victoria again. So thank you very much, Musila, for that answer. I mean, before we move away from that very question, I think it would also be nice to have Anna's views on how intra-African trade can help improve food security across the continent. So that's very, very good point there about focusing on areas of comparative advantages of the country, and then we can trade our food products with one another. But I don't know if Anna has any other views or perspectives on that.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Stephen. Musila has already said a lot regarding comparative advantage and how generally countries in Africa should leverage on what they are best at, what they are best at cultivating, and then find ways to then trade so that there's not too much loss when it comes to agricultural productivity and also exchanges. I'd also like to say that with the AFCFTA, I mean, a lot of hope have been pushed forward through the potential for it to improve food security on the continent. One key thing that needs to be addressed is the negotiations, basically. A lot of countries are still dragging their feet when it comes to their willingness to trade and also their willingness to kind of liberalize certain goods. There are a lot of goods that are nutrition sensitive, and some of these goods have been kind of protected in the sense that they feel that if they're trading those goods to other countries, then people in their own country may face the brunt of like inadequate nutrition and all of that. But countries need to realize that with more liberalization of trade, there'll be better competition and also better opportunities to improve the purchasing power of local farming communities, and also to generally just improve people's access to food, because access is key when it comes to issues of food security. If people do not have access to the food they need, there's no way they can actually improve their nutritional status. There's no way that the benefits of agricultural production can be enjoyed by all parties involved. Another key aspect is when it comes to supply and also improving like the value chains. We know how there are several barriers faced with trade within the continent. It seems as though it's easier to even trade with other countries outside the continent. So if key decision makers are able to come to a point where they realize that kind of making sure that the FCFTA is implemented as much as possible will improve the condition of everybody on the continent. It goes beyond just, okay, maybe the short-term gains. It's like looking further to longer-term gains and what can be done to generally improve food insecurity in Africa as a whole. Another thing that could be considered is possibly the use of food balance sheets, whereby generally like supply is analyzed to know what particular countries are better at when it comes to supply, what they're better at producing, and then how that reaches to people within their own country. So with those food balance sheets, it makes it easier to know the supply levels and also how to improve the ease of access to these resources and food and nutrition sensitive resources generally. So I think with the FCFTA, there's a high potential, but governments need to stop dragging their feet when it comes to implementation and also understand like a broader perspective of benefits for local communities. And they should also think beyond just saying, okay, we're supplying aid to particular communities and helping them through social protection schemes. They should move away from those and look at the benefits of trade and find ways to make it more adaptive to African realities.
Thank you, Anna, for that contribution. I'm so sorry I had a little network connection interruption. Okay, how can technology transfer improve agricultural productivity? Chiamaka, can you please answer that?
Oh, for technology transfer, then we can talk about real-time data in terms of climate change. You know, in technology transfer can also help in mitigating the issue of climate change. Between countries, they can exchange real-time data regarding the climate, their weather conditions, and also they can exchange information on how they can improve like if they know, for instance, that at this time of the year, this is what's going to happen, this is how the weather is going to be, they can actually use technological transfer to combat that by having real-time data and also establishing or developing measures that would help them combat such climate issues or weather conditions. So I would majorly focus on climate change because this is one way that I feel and we can mitigate the issue of climate change, particularly now in Africa, that most of the issues we have relate to climate change, rising temperature, flooding, and everything. We see that in Nigeria earlier this year, we had the issue of flooding in several states. several farming agricultural states. And if we were actually making use of technological transfer, if we were making use of real-time data, if we had actually listened to the warnings, because there were warnings, from the international bodies and even from other countries, and we had all this, but if we had made use of it, we would not have been where we were earlier this year, where we had to face the issue of flooding in several farming communities, and we had to face the issue of food scarcity and even rising food prices. So this is one way that technological transfer can actually come in to solve food security. And then also, we can also use technological transfer to make, value addition. There's something called value addition and processing. We can use technological transfer to make sure that our products are more valuable and that they can actually be transported to, they can actually be exported to other countries. One way we can do this is by looking at what other countries have. For instance, we know that European countries, we know that the US, the UK, these developed countries, they have a lot of technologies that they are using for their processing, and that this has made their food sector very strong. They have a resilient food system, a resilient food and agricultural sector. So we can actually use these technologies, we can employ these technologies to build up our system in Africa, especially in countries where food insecurity and food malnutrition is a big concern. We can use this technological transfer and create, start up the value addition and processing and make sure there are food products. Because one other issue that we face in Africa is the issue of food waste. We know that we are cultivating, but we also have the issue of food waste. Farmers are growing crops, and most of them, because they do not have access to markets and they do not have access to large customer base, some of these foods are being wasted. But if we had access to this technology, if we can actually maximize the use of technological transfer, we can make sure that the food products are not being wasted. We can use the technology to create a food product, a value-added food product that we can even export to other countries. So these are some of the ways that I believe we can use technological transfer to increase food security in Africa.
Thank you very much, Chiamaka. Anna, in an article, I read that after promises to increase intra-African agricultural trade by 574%, will they be able to achieve this now or in the foreseeable future?
Well, that is quite a complex question. But I would say definitely they cannot achieve this now, because generally we know the realities we face, like when it comes to trade, we know all the barriers that are faced by local farmers, even just businesses trying to trade within their own communities, not to talk of like on a more continental level. So unless these barriers are addressed, there's no way that that target is going to be achieved. In the foreseeable future, yes, there's hope for Africa, because I mean, we know like the potential, we know the benefits of free trade, we know the benefits of these agreements if it is properly implemented. But that's the key thing. If it's not implemented properly, then we're still going to keep facing those same issues that we face in Africa regarding access to markets, regarding the dependence on aid and also dependence on agricultural subsidies, because these things in the long run do not improve competition. It doesn't give room for innovation within the system. And this is one key thing that is necessary when it comes to transforming our food systems to achieve food security. There has to be room for innovation. There has to be room for people to compete and also kind of improve their access to markets. So without these things put in place, it's not going to be possible for Africa.
Thank you. Moki, would you like to add anything to what Anna just said?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think I also wrote an article with similar numbers. Yeah, I think the EFTA is looking at boosting agriculture by a possible 574% or yeah, such a number. And this is the truth. This cannot be a short-term goal. Of course, it has to be a long-term goal in terms of improving the whole productivity of Africa. And I believe that it is possible. It is possible. And this is look at what, for example, we are doing right now. It's having conversations and trying to create an awareness and showing people that this is possible. This is where we are having challenge in terms of our trade. This is where we are having challenges in terms of our agriculture. Look at what we've already discussed in terms of technology and being able to borrow from other countries what they are doing good at in terms of maybe it's improving seeds, maybe utilizing better agriculture in food storage, in transportation, in terms of irrigation and such things. We are looking at utilizing data and research, but awareness. It's all about going to that farmer who is used to subsistent agriculture and telling them, at that very low cost, at within that level of viewers, and be able to access a bit more finances and a bit more resources, you are better off growing this particular crop. You are better off focusing on these agricultural products instead of doing the small scale farming, focusing on so much when at the end of the day you end up not achieving too much. And for me, I think it's all about going back to what I talked about concerning the comparative advantage, because Africa is massive. We know that Africa is big, and whatever grows in Kenya doesn't do that well in Morocco or somewhere else. And being able to go to those basics and being able to invest in what works, whether it's at the small scale level, whether it's at the large scale level. I believe that in the long term, these numbers can be able to be achieved. And I want you to remember that there's some sort of a cyclical relationships between people who are having enough food and their general productivity. As gradually as we continue to have enough to be food secure, gradually over time, that is going to be a motivation for us to do even better, invest even better, to adopt better technologies and so on. And I believe in the long term, with the AFCFTA coming in and be able to do away with most of these barriers in terms of trade and exchanging the products that we have, I believe in the long term that we can be able to achieve whatever these trade agreement is promising.
Thank you, Moki. Thank you very much. We appreciate our speakers for taking out time to be here today to educate us on food security and intra-African trade. We have a question from Victor Adeyemi. With the African Trade Agreement, do you see a possibility of government using agricultural subsidies to take unfair market advantage?
Well, yeah, if I can respond to that, of course, when I'm looking at the possibility of actualizing this continental trade agreement, and I'm looking at the regional blocks that we have, and also I'm also looking at the bilateral. Countries are always having these bilateral talks between each other and external countries and so on. So there's always that challenge of the common good for us as Africans, and there's always the mostly a politically motivated need for nations to look after their own interests. Whether it can be justified or not, it's a question for another day. And when it comes to issues to do with subsidies, to take advantage of the agricultural sector, of course, you can expect this from a lot more governments because there are some small countries. For example, you cannot compare a country like Chad with South Africa in terms of negotiating and be able to have to have their own way, which is a major problem as to why most of our regional blocks have not worked in the past. So yeah, of course we can be able. That this is something that we can expect from countries. That countries, will try to take advantage in one way or another. But what I'd like to take refuge in is the fact that the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has these provisions in terms of the competition policies and trade remedies that are designed to ensure that some of these trade distorting practices that can harm competition do not arise. You look at the framework is also encouraging countries in terms of establishing common policies and regulation, trying to harmonize rules and reducing the possibility of market distorting practices being employed. And this is what Anna was trying to point at in terms of negotiating, and it's a whole give and take kind of thing that we expect to see as the framework, starts getting implemented. So yeah, I think we can expect a lot in terms of one government trying to take advantage of the other, but then all we can hope for is that some of these remedies that the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is coming up with can be obeyed, can be taken into consideration. There's something I wanted to mention in terms of non-tariff barriers. We usually have a lot of issues like what I was talking about, delays at our borders, and some of those are some of the loopholes that countries can be able to capitalize on, to take advantage in this particular manner. And you can see the AFCFTA already has come up with a way for traders to be able to report some of these issues. I'm trying to move my goods from Kenya to Uganda. There's a lot of delays within the borders and so on. I can be able to get to the online portal, be able to report that, and then they say the AFCFTA Secretariat can be able to take up that with individual governments and try to solve some of these issues. So yeah, we expect this a lot in the long term, but yeah, I still believe in the promise of the free trade agreement in terms of getting ahead of some of these issues and trying to reduce our suffering as we try to get there to be food secure.
Thank you very much, Muki. Chiamaka, would you like to add anything?
I think Mosila has already said everything.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions or contribution? Okay, in the absence of questions and contribution, we would like to appreciate our speakers once again for educating us on food security and intra-African trade. And like our speakers have said, the issue of food security we can be able to achieve food security, but it is not something that can happen overnight. So gradually, I'm sure we'll get there in Africa. Thank you very much for attending today's webinar. We appreciate your presence and we appreciate our speakers for the educative session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your days, everybody.
Thank you, Victoria, for having me. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone.